Hi everyone, welcome to the December tutorial video. Here is an overview of all the projects we'll be making, and then here are a couple behind the scenes clips from me. Alright, so it's my favorite time of the month because I'm at the post office with all of the craft kits for December. So I'm gonna go run in and get a large cart that I can put them all in and then wheel them in. And yeah, so I wanted to get my boyfriend to help me with this part, but then I realized that there's nowhere for him to sit, so I'm gonna do it myself, which I normally do. Alright, so here are all of the packages for the month. This cart is very big and it fits all of the packages, so yeah, gonna go roll it back in now. So here are all the included supplies for the December kit. First we have the insert, which lists all the supplies as well. Here is an overview when you first open your box and take out the insert, and then here is everything all laid out. And then the very first item is a bottle of UV resin, and this is 25 grams and comes with this like needle tip applicator, a light pink pigment, tape that's really good for making bezels or for filling in bezels, 2 embellishment sets, so dried flowers and some crushed shells, this clear silicone mold to make your own bezel setting, and then all of the bezels are in this bag, and you'll get a closer look at each one throughout the tutorial video. But yeah, there's lots of different sizes, textures / materials. And then the last item is this sticker that my sister designed for the box, and I'm just placing it on my laptop. So I'm going to start with a pretty simple tutorial, one of the easier projects to make. So I'm going to be making a pair of earrings using these 2 silver bezels that were included in the box. And then throughout the videos I'm going to be using the roll of tape and then embellishments such as the crushed shell seen here, and then a lighter to pop the bezels in the UV resin, and then this lamp is what I'm going to be using to cure everything in this video, so that'll be off to the side, but you might see me place the items under it. And then I use a variety of tools to kind of place embellishments, pop bubbles, spread resin, etc. So there's a mixture of silicone and metal tools. And then I also will be using this silicone cup probably later in the video to mix UV resin with the color. So the first step is to secure the bezels so that we can fill them with UV resin. So I'm going to be using this tape to do so, and this tape is great for UV resin in making bezels, specifically open bezels, because it is transparent. So when you shine the lamp on to cure the UV resin, it will go through nicely, and you can flip your bezels on both sides to really cure it well. And then also it leaves no residue once you peel it off from the tape once you're done filling it, so yes. So before you use your bottle of UV resin, you'll need to take off the seal that's inside. So there's like this little ring, and then you'll need to peel the seal off as well. So I decided to put the UV resin on the bottom of each of these bezels. I placed a drop or 2, and then I used a metal tool to spread it around, but I only went about halfway up the bezel because I wanted to leave some blank space at the top, but then later I decided to fill it in with resin anyway, but I only put embellishments on the bottom half, so I kind of did it a little bit like backwards or funky, but it ended up being fine, so yes. So I'm going to be using 2 colors of the crushed shells, so I like to dump out whatever color I'm going to use onto my silicone mat, which I use to work. I use this silicone mat to work on all resin related projects because it cleans up nicely and protects my work surface. So now I'm just placing whichever shells I like, whichever suit my fancy, I guess. And so yeah, I'm going to use this green color and then a purple color and kind of layer them on, and then use the tools such as the metal tool or a silicone tool to push them down more inside the resin. But I'll also be putting on a second layer of UV resin in just a second. After curing that first layer for about a minute, I add my second layer of UV resin. So as I said just a few seconds or a minute ago, I ended up filling the whole thing in with UV resin, even though I only filled in half of it at the start, but you know, whatever. And so yeah, so now I'm just filling in the rest of the bezel with resin and then making sure to cover all of the shells. So then after curing this second layer of UV resin for about another minute, I'm going to peel it off of the tape. And then after that, they're pretty much done, other than just to attach whatever like findings you want. So for instance, I'm going to be turning mine into earrings, so I'm going to add some earring findings. And here's just a quick run through of me attaching the earring findings onto the bezels. So here is our first finished project, and then my attempt at modeling them. This might come as a surprise to you, but I'm not a professional earring model by any means, but you know, I do my best. Alright, so the next bezel up is probably, that sounded weird, bezel up. Reminds me of this restaurant I really like called Bout Up. That's a bit of a tangent. Anyway, this bezel is probably my favorite shape out of all of them because it's very irregular and reminds me of a Dali painting. So I'm just adhering it to the tape, and for this one in particular, I'm really making sure it sticks really well since it is an irregular shape. Alright, so I'm just going to fill in an initial layer of UV resin without any embellishments, just to get a base layer going. And so I'm using my clear UV resin, and then I'm adding a few drops, some drops, filling most of it, but I want this layer to be pretty thin, so I'm going to finish spreading it with this needle tool, and I'm also going to make sure that it hits all of the edges of the bezel. That way there's no gaps, because when I add a second layer of resin, if there's a gap between your first layer and then the outline of the bezel, your next layer will seep through, and this can cause leakage and also bubbles. Alright, so then after popping the bubbles with my lighter, I'm going to cure this for about a minute. So then once I made sure that it was fully sealed and that there were no gaps, I took it off of the tape, and then I'm going to do the rest of the bezel without using the tape. Alright, so now I'm adding a second layer of UV resin, and I decided to spread the UV resin all the way past the outline of the bezel, so over the gold part of the bezel as well, just to make it all kind of cohesive and shiny. Alright, so now I'm adding the mini dried flowers to the bezel and a leaf. So I just chose the flowers that I liked and that I thought looked best against the gold. So I'm using a needle tool to place them, and then after I'm done placing them and kind of like pushing them down to sink them into the resin, I pop whatever bubbles I might see with my lighter, and then I cure it. After curing it, I noticed that the resin wasn't all the way covering the flowers and wasn't all the way to the edge of the bezel, and so I added a third layer and then spread that all out, and then I cured that, and then this bezel is done as well. So here's the finished bezel, and again, I really like this shape and think it is a really unique bezel. So the next two bezels we'll be making are wooden bezels, and so this first one is a circle bezel, and because this one is closed, so it's not open back, we don't need to be using the tape. And so I already started putting the flowers into the bezel, and with this bezel it is a larger circle, so you can really play around with the composition of whatever embellishments you want. So this kit comes with the mini dried flowers and the crushed shells, so I'm going to be playing around with the flowers and the leaves, but you can also use your own embellishments and get creative. Alright, so after I arranged all of the flowers and leaves the way I want them, I'm filling it in with a layer of UV resin, and this project I only used one layer of UV resin, so I'm spreading it out throughout the entire bezel. Sorry, my hand's kind of blocking the bezel and some of this situation going on here, but yeah, so then also after I put the layer of UV resin, I made sure that all the flowers were pushed down inside the UV resin because sometimes they'll tend to float to the top, so I just push them down using a needle tool. So then after curing it for a minute, this bezel is done as well. So that was one of the shorter projects for this video. Alright, so the next wood bezel project is this triangle bezel, and I already filled it with an initial layer of UV resin. I put it on the tape first, filled it with a layer of UV resin, and then cured that layer. I thought I wouldn't show you that process again because it's pretty repetitive from the other open bezels. But yes, so now I'm going to try to achieve a stained glass look, and so I'm using the crushed shells in various colors and then placing them to fill the entire bezel. And it won't be perfect, there will be some gaps, but I think that adds to the stained glass look, hopefully, or at least that's what I think anyway. And so once I have all of the shells placed in, you know, the arrangement that I want, I'm going to add a second layer of UV resin and then cure that. So now I'm using a product that was in last month's box, so the November Delicate Jewelry box, and it is a brush on UV sealant / polish, and so I'm brushing it on to the entire bezel, including the wooden frame part, and then after I'm done coating it, I'm going to cure it as if it's regular UV resin, so I'm just going to place it under the UV lamp. Alright, so now this bezel is done as well, and I also have a shot of it on the railing of my balcony to kind of show more of the stained glass effect, and I was kind of worried it was going to topple over, but luckily it did not. Alright, so the next projects are these ceramic bezels. I'll be making both of them at the same time. So I'm just filling them in with a thin layer of the UV resin, and if you notice that light that just went off, that was my UV lamp that I had curing another project off to the side. But yeah, so I'm filling these in with a base layer of UV resin. So these two are pretty simple. I'm just going to be using the dried flowers again. So I'm just going to arrange them in the way that I want, and then I'll use a leaf as well, a leaf or two as well, and use my needle tool to kind of push them down into the resin to make sure they're completely covered by the UV resin. After I get these in the placement that I want, I'm going to cure them under a UV lamp for a minute, and then these two are done as well. So here are the final ceramic bezels. I like the ceramic bezels because they feel really nice and also make a really nice clinking sound. Alright, so for the final project for this video, we're going to be making our own bezel setting. So I'm starting out with a bunch of UV resin, and then I'm adding the purple pigment, and then I'm mixing it up using a silicone stirring tool. So now I'm going to be pouring the mixture inside the silicone mold that was included in this month's kit. The silicone cup was not included in this month's kit, but if you are new to UV resin and need a set of starter tools such as this silicone cup, some mixing tools, and a lot more, I do offer a UV resin starter kit, which I'll leave in the description below. So then after popping bubbles using a lighter and then the silicone tool as well, I'm going to cure it under my UV lamp, and I'm going to cure it for like 2 to 3 minutes because I did add pigment and sometimes that can slow the curing process. Alright, so once that is nice and cured, I'm going to pop it out of the silicone mold. So once it's out of the mold, I'm going to be using it as a bezel. So it's going to be an open back bezel. So I'm going to use my handy dandy tape. I hate that I just used the words handy dandy, but moving along. So this tape is just barely wide enough for the circle, the open circle. So if you want to double up and kind of like put 2 layers of tape, you can do that as well, but it's just barely wide enough to do that. So yes. Alright, so I'm all up close and personal in this shot, but I'm just putting down a base layer of UV resin. So I'm going to add a thin layer of UV resin to the bottom and use some tools to spread it out, make sure it covers all the way to the edges of the bezel, and then cure that initial first layer of UV resin. Alright, so then after I cured the first layer, I actually added another layer of UV resin. So there's a layer of UV resin from what you can see here that's uncured, and so I'm going to be using both the crushed shells that I just kind of spilled everywhere. I didn't realize I had more than one compartment open when I did that, so yeah, anyway, so I'm going to be placing the shells down first and covering most of the bezel, and then I'm going to add flowers on top of that. So then once I had everything set the way that I wanted, after I put all the embellishments that I wanted, I added another layer of UV resin on top of everything just to cover everything, and then I cured that second layer, kind of like 2/3 layers of resin, or 1 or 2 layers of UV resin, I guess. I cured those, and then this bezel is done. And then I balanced it on top of my rail of my balcony again, just like the triangle bezel. And this time it also did not fall, so I did not lose any bezels in the making of this video. Alright, so here are a couple more overviews of all the bezels that I made in this video, and thank you guys so much for watching until the end of this video. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, please do so. And then if you want to find out more about Craft Kitsune, please go to the description box down below. Next month's project will be to make resin shakers, so it will come with all 8 of the molds seen here in this resin pour that I'm doing. And so if you sign up by the end of this month, so by December 31st, you will receive this kit as your first kit if you are not a current subscriber, of course. So yeah, I hope you're looking forward to that kit if you are a current subscriber. And if you are not a current subscriber, I'd really love to have you, and we will be making some really awesome shakers together. So yeah, that'll be next month. So I will see you in the next video. Bye!